let's take a look at how we can use Lua expressions or mathematical expressions in the app. As I think many of you know, Lua is a language that's interpreted. So sitting under this app is actually an engine that we can feed code to, as we're running. We can actually invent new code while the app's running and run it through the Lua interpreter and do some very sophisticated manipulations of the data if we want to. So let's proceed down here to the bottom of the menu to Lua variables. And you'll see that we already have one in here that's called S1. The variables will be named S1, S2, S3, S for sensor, I guess. You can edit those names and change them, as you can see. And that I would basically be taking the sensors that are in my telemetry system and turning them into variables in a computer programming sense. So let's pick up S2 and let's pick up central box UAKU 2. That's the voltage of battery number 2. Okay, so that's setting up these values of S1 and S2 so that we can use them in expressions. We can use them in combination. We could, for example, have one of them be a voltage and one of them be a current, and we could multiply them together to get watts to create a gauge that displayed watts for an electric airplane would be a common application of this. And then what you'll see is that if I go up to my inputs and I pick the battery gauge, and I say the gauge input source for this is going to be Lua, and then it's going to say, okay, would you like to edit the Lua? And what will come up here is the Lua editor. Now, this Lua editor was originally written by Martin Faltico when he was at Jetty for their virtual sensor application, and it's just a brilliant way to use the controls on the transmitter to edit something. So suppose I wanted to have a very simple expression like the variable S1, which you can remember we just put in a minute ago, and that's telling me that evaluates to 10, and then I use my left and right. This would be my wheel on the transmitter to select different operators. So let's say times, and let's go over here to say times 2, and you see that's a Lua value of 20. And so if I wanted to have a gauge that read 2 times the voltage of the battery on the transmitter, that's how I would do that. So that's kind of a trivial example, but basically we can go into inputs, and on any of these gauges, if we want to have a complicated expression, which can be actually quite complicated, there's no fixed limit on what you can do here. You'll see the error messages down here below are from when we had a partial expression, and normally you wouldn't see that on the transmitter, and I leave that there just for debugging purposes. When it just said S1, we got a value of 10. When we said S1 times, that's not really a legal expression, so I was getting error messages. But of course, as soon as we have a legal expression, we get the value down here. So we could, say times 22, or we could say times 2, or we could say S1 times S2, or perhaps maybe more interestingly, if we wanted to know the state of charge of our battery, I built in some custom functions for right now just for LiPos and LiFe's. And suppose we wanted to have LiFe state of charge, and so this is a function. So we're going to say the open parentheses here, and then we're going to say the S1 variable and close parentheses. And so it would read the voltage of the sensor for the voltage of battery 1. It would put it in Lua variable S1, and then it would do the function LIFE S for state of charge of S1, and it would say, well, that's fully charged, it's 100%. And so I'd be able to, for example, have a gauge that was kind of a fuel gauge for my battery, and I've put already into the app an extension, but although I've set it up so that if pilots know how to write simple Lua code, they can add their own extensions, and there's a lookup table in that extension that looks up the state of charge versus voltage for LiFe's and for LiPo batteries. Okay.